going live.
Click Zoom meeting.
Okay.
All you going first click is just click from because you're going live. You're live.
I'm trying to click. I'm trying to get there. Okay. I clicked on Zoom. It looks like it's
No, that's what I'm saying. Click on the background. Click.
The background. That.
Click. Just click.
Okay, I clicked.
You're not clicking? Okay, go to Zoom meeting. Click again.
I'm on it. Maybe I need to do dual so you can see what's going on.
Well, no, I can see everything. Click on Zoom meeting. For some reason, it's not clicking for some reason.
Okay, I just clicked on it.
All right, do 3 fingers. I got you. I'm watching everything. Do 3 fingers. Nope. On the mouse. Bottom of the mouse. There you go. Now click on the Zoom meeting to the right. Up to again.
This thing. I need to get a mouse to go with this. We need a mouse.
3 fingers away. 3 fingers away. Quickly. Quickly.
3 fingers.
All right, now click to the. Yep. Now click on the Zoom meeting to the right. There you go. Click on that.
Okay.
There you go. Now click on the green dot right here.
Okay. Oh, that's.
Exit out of settings.
Okay. Oh, the green dot up there. Okay.
Boom, y'all good. I'm out of here.
Are we live?
Yes, you're live.
All right. Thanks, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle. Have a great day.
Bye. We should look on the Facebook page just to make sure. Later on, this stuff could be edited out. So.
Yes, you can edit.
Or Kyle can edit it out. Okay, I see we're on. So, good morning, everyone. This is attorney Robyn McCoy and attorney Tracey Martin, and this is Political Coffee with Robyn and Tracey. So,
hi, everybody.
Yes, good morning, everyone. I know some people may have just awakened themselves, but anyway, I have Wonder Woman. I've been sticking to her lately.
I love it.
Yeah, what do you? And I'm drinking. I have Breathe Easy tea, and I think it's some echinacea, ginger, and lemon and honey. What do you have?
Is that the same mug, Robyn? Because it looks a little different, or is that the other side of it?
It's probably the other side of it. Yeah, it's the same mug. I mean, I'm trying.
Okay, looks so cool. Okay, yes. I'm really getting a good look at it today.
I think beautiful. It's the blue because I noticed when I was looking at it and I had the blue with the blue, or maybe it's her hair.
It pops. Right.
Maybe it's her hair. Her hair does.
Yeah, we're not used to. Yes, the blue black. Right. She's killing it. Right.
Right. She's working it. And what do you?
Yeah,
what do you have in your mug?
Well, I have my peace mug today, and I think it's working. It's mojo because, and inside I have hazelnut like I did last week. But last week I had the iced coffee, and this week I have the actual warm coffee, and I'm going to take a sip.
Yeah.
Because, I really need it. I lost a dear friend of mine less than 48 hours ago, and I actually want to dedicate the show to him, Political Coffee. His name is Calvin J. Jackson. And
sorry for your loss, too.
Calvin.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I was just saying sorry for your loss. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you, Robyn. We were friends for 21 years, and I met him before I went to law school, and he attended law school as well. And he most recently worked at Frank Murphy Hall of Justice and Pretrial Services. And Cal and I, we always talked about politics, and, he was a Kappa, and I always attended the Kappa's candidate forums. In fact, I think they were planning a virtual candidate forum for this year, and Cal was going to be instrumental with that.
Sorry to interrupt, Tracey. Hello, Dr. Abdul ElSayed. Can you speak so we can make sure we can hear you?
In the house.
Can you speak so we can make sure that we can hear you?
Yep, you guys hear me okay?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Welcome.
Hi, Doctor.
So we already went
Thank you
over
so much.
what's in. I have my Wonder Woman mug with my echinacea and breathe easy and ginger and lemon and honey, and then Tracy, show what your mug is.
I've got the peace mug, and I'm wishing peace all across America and the world.
Yeah. So and then you have your mug, and so what?
I feel like my mug is kind of plain, but we're gonna call it the shiny mug, and we're gonna hope that peace and justice shine in the world. And what's inside of it is I'm a bit of a coffee obsessive, and so I brew my own cold brew, and this is a cold brew with oat milk and maple syrup. It's the best coffee sweetener, by the way. If you're ever interested in like a good sweetener that's not too sweet but gives it some like dusky flavor, maple syrup is the way to go.
Right.
Right. Okay.
Doctor, you might want to market that.
I know.
Very good.
And the mug, you can say, talk about having eco-friendly mugs and stuff like that. And they may not be necessarily fashionable, but they're environmentally sound.
Reusable and the nice thing about this mug is you can take it anywhere. People kind of know how to use it, and it's got a top, and so it works out. But really a privilege to be joining you this morning. I figured we were doing Saturday morning, so I hope you'll forgive me for the cap and the shirt. But no,
that's fine. You got that
Saturday
edgy
morning.
look. You're representing for the D, so
that's right.
Right. You look great. It's Saturday, and we usually do these political coffees in the afternoon, but we wanted to catch up with you, Dr. El-Sayed, because you're doing so much now. You've got this hot new book out called Healing Politics that we want to discuss today. And I know you've got this new podcast. Congratulations on that. Relatively new. I think you did about a year and a half ago or something. America Dissected.
That's right. So America Dissected, especially now, is really focused on COVID-19, but we launched it back late 2019, and the focus then was on digging deeper into some of these big public health stories that people have only really heard about in the news, but sometimes can't really make heads or tails of. And so we kicked off with 10 episodes focusing on everything from Goop, the folks who try and sell you problematic skincare or vaccines or the price of prescription drugs. And then, we had planned to make it a 10 episode run, and that was it. And then COVID-19 happened, and folks were like, "Yo, there is no bigger public health story, so maybe you should reignite the pod." So we did, and I think we're on the 26th episode now. We just interviewed this last week Kerry Jr. II, who's actually an audio producer at the Free Press, and was incidentally one of the first producers on the pod. And then also a woman named Dr. Julia Curtis, who has this concept of harm reduction in COVID-19 and talking about what it means to get out there for the protests. I get really frustrated when I hear people trying to pit the protests against public health, and the protests are for public health. We literally say Black Lives Matter, and so that is about protecting Black life. 83,000 Black Americans die unnecessarily in excess every year because of racism, and that's what these protests are about. And for the same folks who are trying to wag their finger at protesters, my point is that, like, yo, if you were in a position of power, you could have done something about this to begin with. So maybe we wouldn't have to be protesting if authorities took this seriously.
Right.
So here we are. But
yeah, I had to. You brought up Black Lives Matter. I had to share this artwork from this young man. He's a recent high school graduate, Timothy Lacey. His mother is our vice president for Vanzetti Hamilton Bar, which is the Black Bar Association. And so he graduated. He was kind of bummed, and so he did. His mother showed me some artwork, and I showed them my attempts, my pitiful attempts at signs. And he looked at it. He was going to try to work with some of my stuff, and then he made that one, and then the one behind me that says Breonna Taylor, Black Lives Matter. Yeah. That's Timothy Lacey. He is 18 years old, so a young aspiring artist.
That's beautiful.
Fantastic. And I'm so glad, Doctor, that you talked about the intersectionality between the protests and public health. And I think that's an interesting comment because there is so much concern of late about this seeming resurgence in COVID-19. But as I understand it, the virus never retreated. It's always been there. So are we still in the first wave, or what's going on? And what tips do you have for protesters who may be on the protest lines? I know they're in open air, but what other tips can you give them to stay safe?
Yeah, that's right. So, we're sort of in the first plateau. If you look at the number of cases, it went up really quickly, and that was a wave, and then it just sort of plateaued. And it's gone lower and lower very, very slowly. But the wave comment is maybe not the right one about what we're in. And so that's what led to, I think, some confusion, right? As folks are like, are we still in this first wave, or are we expecting a second wave? And I think the fear that a lot of folks have is that there's going to be a resurgence in cases, and then we're going to start seeing cases start going back up really quickly, and that's a real fear. And when that happens, let's be clear a couple of things about this, and I'll get to the question about what protesters can do. We were worried about a resurgence well before Freddie Gray was assassinated in the streets or Breonna Taylor was killed in her own home. We were worried about
George Floyd. Yeah, you said Freddie Gray. George Floyd.
I'm sorry, George Floyd. Forgive me.
That's okay.
Forgive me for that. I mean, at this point, right? George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Freddie Gray and Trayvon Martin.
Right. They're all a part of the martyrs of the system. Yeah.
But thank you for the correction. George Floyd, was murdered in the street, and Breonna Taylor was murdered in her own home. We were worried about that resurgence in the first place, and that's because it's not driven by these protests. I mean, think about it. At the maximum, right? You had a couple thousand people in the streets. Think about all of the interactions that people are sharing in grocery stores and Home Depots and out on their porches at picnics. Like, that's a far bigger scale of interaction. And so humans generally look at the thing that is the most different from usual, and they don't pay attention to the usual things. And what's going to drive real transmission of this virus is going to be what's the most usual. That's why we shut it down in the first place. So that's number one. But then number two, yes, of course, interacting in public right now carries with it more hazards than in usual times, because it can transmit COVID-19. So some of the things that protesters can do to stay safe are, number one, wear a mask, right? And that's something you should be doing when you're in public, no matter where you go. Wear a mask. And I know that folks find them annoying. You can't breathe and it's getting hot. But the evidence and the science behind wearing masks is really quite strong. And it's one simple thing that you can do to protect yourself, protect others. The second is to bring hand sanitizer and use it often. Okay. People should, be sanitizing every 5 to 10 minutes or wearing gloves. A third is that, most of the transmission of COVID-19 is respiratory. It's from droplets that come out of your mouth and nose. And that usually happens when you cough, or also when you yell, right? I don't know if you've ever seen somebody like yell and the light is behind them and you can see all the spray come out of their mouth. In normal times.
So you saying don't yell, don't cough?
Yeah, exactly. What I'm saying is, if you're going to wear a mask, bring something to make noise. And like you showed those beautiful signs from that young man, bring a sign, right? Bring a sign, bang a drum. But if you can avoid screaming, that's always better. I know it's hard to do at a protest, but these are different times, and I feel like you can come out there and you can carry your message without necessarily screaming, which reduces the droplets. And then come with a group of people and leave with that same group of people. If you're gonna go and there are people in your household, for example, that are going out to the protests, go out together and don't circulate necessarily within the whole protest, right? Because every person you come in contact with is somebody you can transmit it to. So if we protested sort of like in little pods of people who came together, kind of like whale swim, right? So you're just there with the people that you're with. You don't really interact too much with the broader group. That can be really helpful. But then the other side of it that nobody ever talks about is the things that the police need to do to keep it safe from COVID-19, right? When you handcuff folks and you put them in a holding bus or a holding van, or you put them in a jail, you're confining those people in enclosed space for a long period of time, which increases spread. And then the other thing that we saw cops doing early on was using tear gas. And like I told you, right, it's those droplets that are so bad. So if you've got tear gas and you're stripping off your mask and you're coughing and you're crying all over the place, that's not good for the spread of this virus. And so that tear gas use itself was bad for a COVID-19 spread. So I think there are a lot of things that protesters can do, but there's also things that we expect the police not to engage on. And in this conversation, it still forces a broader conversation about what we ought to do in terms of keeping our community safe and investing in folks, which are really part of the goal of these protests in the first place.
Yeah, when you talk about the close confined quarters, it makes me think because Attorney Martin and I are both attorneys, and so and I practice over at Frank Murphy Hall of Justice, and we have a lot of we represent a lot of people that are in the Wayne County Jail. I know that the sheriff has released some folks. I think the number yesterday they said may have been like there's still 849 people there, and I don't know if you probably have heard in the news there were 2 doctors that died at the Wayne County Jail. First, there were 2 deputies. Then there were two deputies, 2 doctors, and they said there was an inmate in the news that was released that subsequently died. And so I know with the Wayne County Criminal Defense Bar, we've been filing motions for compassionate release for our clients. And then Tracy and I wrote a letter, at the suggestion of State Rep Isaac Robinson to request the compassionate release for the former mayor of Detroit, Kwame Kilpatrick, and other offenders. Like I have some friends, Coral Watt and Vincent Toussaint. They do motions for people who are in the federal system for compassionate release. Yes.
And I think what you're getting at is that jails are remarkably bad places to hold people, jails and prisons. And I think you all as attorneys know this, but for listeners, right, a lot of folks sort of think of jail and prison as the same thing, and they're not, right? Prison tends to be the place where you stay for a long period of time. Jail is a place that you stay for a short period of time, and jails in particular are terrible because people cycle in and out of them, right? And so once you've had enough flow of the virus inside of a jail, now all you're doing is exposing people into it, and then releasing them back into the population where they can spread it. So jail itself is a terrible system, and then prison itself was also really dangerous because one of the things that people don't appreciate is that the prison population tends to be pretty elderly, like the rest of the population, and so you end up having a lot of people out there who have underlying conditions and are particularly set up for a bad outcome. The other thing that I think that this forces us to think about, right, is that the failures of our criminal legal system extend deep, right? It's not just the assassination of George Floyd in the street or the murder of Breonna Taylor in her home. It's
or Ahmaud Arbery too. Ahmaud Arbery is the case for the young man that was in Georgia too.
That's right. But the tip of the iceberg is that police are killing people in the street, but there's a whole other bit of the iceberg that people don't talk as much about, which is the prison industrial complex. So a lot of it, right, I think has to come to the fore as we talk about decisions that we make about right sizing our public services. And the last thing that toward that point that tends to frustrate me in this moment right now is that we're not having a thoughtful conversation about the bigger picture exclusion of Black Americans across every aspect of what we call the public in our society, right? So, when we talked about COVID-19, we sort of talked about COVID, and then we talked about disparities in COVID. But people don't appreciate that this is part and parcel of the entire system, right? Our public health system excludes Black folks, right? 2.5 times as many Black folks died per capita of COVID-19 as it stands, right? So Black folks are excluded from the public and public health.
Right.
And doctor, I got to interject. Why is that? Is that because of the lack of a true universal healthcare system and people of color not being able to tap into really good, sound medicine and health treatment?
It's certainly an important part of it. And, the fact that people can't get health care when they get sick is a really important part of it. But it's even bigger than that, right? It's like, you think about it, when we think about health and disease, people only spend 1-2% of their life in a clinic or a hospital, right? It's all the things outside of the clinic and hospital, the air they breathe, the water they drink, the jobs that folks have to work, whether or not they'll be protected in their place of work. They're cycling in and out of the job market, working a gig rather than a job that comes with benefits and retirement. It is the infrastructure that people drive that is crumbling, the lack of access to mass transit, the brokenness of our public education system. It tends to funnel people based on the color of their skin into certain jobs or certain vocations or certain paths of work versus others. It is the failure of our frankly, our public services to represent people of color in real ways. I mean, just think about this. It's 2020, and there's one Black woman in the Senate. Of 100 people, one Black woman.
Right.
And so in all of these ways, right, we are failing to address the things that tend to make people sick in the first place, even before the fact that after they get sick, they don't have health care afterwards, right? And so it's the whole system together. It's sort of the focus of my book, about talking about this epidemic of insecurity, in the ways that the systems that we rely on to provide us the means of a dignified life have crumbled, and they've crumbled disproportionately for Black folks, and for poor folks, and for folks in rural communities. And if we're going to fix it, right, we've really got to be thinking beyond the tip toward the rest of the iceberg, and the ways that iceberg is connected, right? The fact that, COVID-19 killed 13,000, when it hit 100,000 deaths, 13,000 of those deaths were excess Black deaths, meaning deaths to Black folks that account for the fact that Black folks were 2.5 times as likely to die of COVID-19 per capita than white folks, right? If you were to just say, look, if Black folks died at the same rate as white folks, you would have saved 13,000 lives right there from COVID-19. And that shapes the experience, right, in the circumstance where George Floyd is then murdered in the street, Breonna Taylor is murdered in her home.
And Ahmaud Arbery was the first one who was jogging along, and then he, the guys jump, the McMichaels and their neighbor jump out of the car and attack him and basically killed him. And that's just, it's insane. Yeah.
And that's right. And so Ahmaud, you think about Ahmaud's experience, you think about Breonna's experience, you think about George's experience. You also think about Chris Cooper. He was the guy just going out to watch the birds in Central Park. And then,
right.
It was that viral video of the woman calling the police, weaponizing his race against him. So these things are all connected, and they connect in ways that systematically hurt Black folks. And if we're going to get serious about this problem, we've got to start with law enforcement, and rethink the laws, rethink the prison industrial complex, rethink the way we even think about police. But it's also got to extend even further back into every aspect of the way we live our lives in this country.
And Dr. El-Sayed, I know in your book, I started listening to it on audiobooks, and it was very touching. I mean, I could see why my Aunt Virgie was in your corner from day one. She was like, "Oh, I'm supporting Abdul." She's like, "Abdul for governor, Abdul for president." But as I was reading or listening to the book, you actually recounted how you had your own experience with when you were in high school, I believe, with the police and being manhandled and having to be taken home to your father, who was Egyptian. My parents had been to Egypt. I want to go. I want to go when it's safe to go. But and then at the juvenile court where Tracy and I both worked, I worked. Our referee was Mona Yusuf, who's Egyptian, who's just a beautiful person, beautiful spirit. But so tell us, because you're not somebody that's just talking about experiences that people have with the police and the public health crisis. You yourself have had your own experiences with the police. So can you tell us a little bit more, like, how do you feel about all that's going on in light of what you experienced as a young man? Or you probably, I don't know, you may have current experiences.
Yeah. I was 16, going out to play basketball with a group of my friends, all of whom a really diverse group of people. And it was past 12, and the cop car rolled by, and all my friends said, "Look, if the cop car rolls by again, we're going to run." I said, "Well, we didn't do anything. Why would we run?" And it rolled by again. They all booked it. I was like, "We didn't do anything." So I stayed put. 2 dogs come bolting out of that car, and at that point, I just booked it and got caught. And the 2 cops threw me to the ground, and I didn't quite understand why I was being thrown to the ground. I got right back up. I got a pepper spray bottle over the top of the head. And the first question that they asked me was, "What are you doing in this part of town?" And it was really confusing to me. I grew up in Oakland County. And I said, "I live in this part of town." They said, "No, what are you doing outside of Mexican town?" And it was one of those moments for a second. I was like, okay, like, you're assuming things about where I'm from because of what I look like. And also, in your estimation, in your worldview, somebody who looks like me can't live in this neighborhood. And the truth of the matter is, it was one of the first times that I realized that I was going to be seen as part of the problem. But let's be honest, right? I got out of that experience with my life. The worst thing that happened, I got a welt over my head that, and a gash. For too many Black folks in particular, they don't get out of it that way. And so in some respects, I came to appreciate the lack of privilege that I had in this world, but also how much privilege I also had in this world, right? And it was a recognition for me. The other experience is, I can modulate the way I am perceived by authorities based on how I dress and how I present in the world.
Right, code
if
switching.
I put on a hoodie and dress like this,
yeah.
Say it again.
I said code
exactly,
switching.
Right? That's exactly right. And so, if I remember, I fly quite a bit usually, outside of COVID times, and for that reason, I tend to get upgraded because I've got a lot of miles. And I remember I had an overnight flight. And so usually, in my rule is you always dress well on an airplane, because if you want to be treated with respect, that's what you have to do as, a young brown man. But this was an overnight flight, so I put on a hoodie and I had some sweatpants, and they called for boarding. It's a little thing, right? Called for boarding, and I go up to board, as I usually do, right, for my first class, business class seat, and the individual looks at me. She's like, no, we're not boarding you yet. I was like, oh, really? That's interesting. Why not? And she said, well, we're boarding business class only. And I showed her my ticket, and I said, so that is me. And then she realized what she had done. She's like, I'm so sorry, Mr. I was like, that's Dr. ElSayed to you. You're sorry, Dr. ElSayed. And I'm gonna walk on my plane now. But it's the thing is that people assume what you are based on how you look, based on pre-read scripts about what people who look a certain way are. And on nobody does that fall as dangerously and as in such a deadly way as Black folks, in particular Black men, who are criminalized simply for being, because of society's scripts and stereotypes about who folks are, and it's deadly. I mean, that's the only way that anybody can think that they're justified to put their knee on the neck of a person for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, is that you see them as implicitly dangerous. And deconstructing that whole thing, that's the work in front of us right now. But for me, I'm lucky. It didn't kill me. It didn't maim me. It didn't get me shot. I think about what it might have been if I didn't get to hide behind so much privilege, right? If I was in a different circumstance, or the color of my skin was different. And that's the thing. So, I understand it a little bit, but I don't understand it to the same degree. And I think for a lot of folks, that recognition that you are going to be assumed to be a criminal until proven otherwise is not something that ever crosses their mind, right? You talk to white folks, and that's not something that crosses their mind. I remember having a conversation with my grandpa. So I was raised by my father and my stepmom.
Right. I remember you recounted
American.
that they met. I think, were they both working at the Ford plant, or I think you said they came
GM. Yeah.
GM. Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And my grandpa, who's like super well-meaning and really progressive. Yeah, I remember we were in college, and we were talking about police, and he's like, "Well, the police are out there to help you." I was like, "Police? In my experience, the police have never been out there to help me." Right.
Right.
That's never been my experience. And so when I see cops, when I get pulled over to this day, right, my heart races.
Right. I think all of us, it's all of, if heart races, I'm going to do a prayer. I do a program on what to do when stopped by the police. The first thing I say is you do a prayer, calm down, no sudden moves,
But Doctor, you raised a good point. I want to ask you about this intersection between racism, discrimination, implicit and explicit bias, and mental health, because you said when you get stopped by the police, your heart starts racing. What is the long-term impact of all of this stress on people of color, and does that contribute to a suppressed immune system when they're facing a pandemic like COVID-19?
That's a really good question, Tracy. The evidence suggests that yes, it does. These are processed as traumas, and there was a survey in Detroit the beginning of in the early 2000s that actually looked at the rate of post-traumatic stress in Detroit, and it was like 15%. It was as if you put the entire city of Detroit into a war, right? And that was the experience. Now, they also looked at whether or not that had implications on the functioning of immune cells, right? The cells that keep you safe in the middle of the pandemic, and they found that it did. And so all of these are part of a broad sort of patchwork that that leave folks in a position of vulnerability to all of the other assaults and insults that come in daily life. And so that's that's COVID-19 in COVID-19 times, but that's also the flu, right? When we're not paying attention. It's also pneumonia when we're not paying attention. Add that to the fact that Detroiters suffer threefold the probability of asthma hospitalizations, and you can realize how these things come together and create a syndrome that that shows you how racism can get under the skin. It's the racism of feeling victimized by the police. It's the racism of having to even just like code switch in your mind all the time about how you're presenting to groups of people and what people are thinking about you.
Right.
Du Bois wrote about this idea of exactly. And over time, there's actually a really great set of studies that really capture this idea. A professor named Arlene Geronimus at Michigan did this work, and she looked at and it's going to take me a second to set this up, but I'll explain. She looked at the probability of adverse birth outcomes, so things like premature birth or low birth weight infants over time with age among Black folks, Black women, babies of Black women relative to babies of white women. And what she showed is that the disparity increased with time, right? And so you would wonder, why is this disparity increasing with time? And her argument was that it is the manifestation of consistent racism that you experience that pounds away at your life that then increases the probability of a bad outcome in a baby. So it's you think about like the transgenerationality of it.
Right. Yeah, when you're saying that, my mom is a nurse, and she was talking about, African American women have disproportionate numbers of fibroids, and she thinks that that's a carryover from slavery, from all the, like, it's almost like something has been transmitted genetically, and that, or maybe the cells remember certain things, and because you see Black women disproportionately have fibroids and also disproportionately have hysterectomies.
And the other part that we didn't even talk about is the way that Black folks are treated in the hospitals, right? The assumption that that when people are complaining of pain that they're making it up, or the assumption that Black folks are less health literate and don't know what they're asking for, right? And the prime example of that is Serena Williams, who had a blood clot and told them, "I'm having a blood clot."
Right. She said, "I can't breathe," just like George Floyd. I can't breathe.
That's right.
Wow. Well, Dr. El-Sayed, how much longer do we have you for? I know Tara said about 25, 30 minutes. How's your time?
I've probably got to get going in the next 20 minutes or so. I've got this, I'm working on this Sanders Biden task force, and we've got a interminable meeting that lasts today. It's like a 3-hour meeting that starts in a little bit. So I've got to do a little bit of preparation. But.
Okay. I'm sure my Aunt Virgie is probably either involved or helping to coordinate that. She's very, very busy. We were supposed to have the Michigan Women's Democratic Women's Caucus, our annual, we used to be Jeff Jack luncheon, now they call it the Legacy luncheon, but Rona on the streets, as they call Rona, rode up and flipped the script, changed everything. So, when you were recounting about how the situation with the plane and wearing a suit, it made me think of my former father-in-law, Dr. James Nabwangu, or Jim Nabwangu, who was a neurosurgeon, and he was the first Black to get into Johns Hopkins, and he was Kenyan. And he recounted, so he said when he flew, he would wear suits too, so as opposed to wearing jogging suits and being concerned about the higher profiling. And so it definitely, what you said about the code switching, it definitely made me think of that. And when he got into Johns Hopkins, they made him sign a contract saying that he couldn't practice here as a doctor. And so that's what some of the universities would do. They would let in Blacks and they would let in Africans, but make them sign contracts saying that they wouldn't practice in America, but they would go back to their respective countries and give praises on this progressive university. And for him, what he did is he actually went over to Canada and practiced, and then he ultimately did come back here when I guess it was more permissible to do so. But yeah, definitely he had to deal with a lot of issues as far as code switching.
Well, God bless him. And just think about what we lose as a society when we exclude people like him from being able to practice, right? I mean, clearly a brilliant, brilliant human being, and told that because of the color of your skin, you can't save people's lives in our own society. Like, what garbage is that?
Right.
I mean, just think of, right? Like what, I mean, and this is the thing about it, is it like, clearly the people who are victims of racism suffer most. But when we fester this stuff, all of us suffer. That's just one tiny little example, right? Like a man who is, best and brightest in his society, coming here to learn how to practice and being trained at the best medical school in the country, and then told that he actually cannot do that. He cannot take care of people who are ill or sick in our own society. Like, what absurdity!
Right.
Well, Dr. El-Sayed, I heard you say earlier, well, you used the term war, and I heard you fairly recently on NPR. It was an interview, and you said something that struck me. You said, in the context of this COVID-19 pandemic, that you feel like a general without a war. What's the next step for you in terms of leadership? You ran for governor in 2018, and you were the Bernie Sanders endorsee. What's next for you?
Yeah, it's kind of yet to ask. I don't know.
I'm hearing Abdul from president. I'm sure that's what I heard you would say. Abdul for president.
Right now, I'll tell you this. Listen, I could ask for no better supporter than Ms. Virgie Rollins, who has been in my corner since day one. And you know, if you, and I'm sure you know this, Robyn, that if you could ask, you can't ask for somebody who's better in your corner than she is. And I'm just really grateful for all the work that she's done to build out a space for people of color of all stripes to be able to have a niche in a space in politics. I mean, that, and if you ever get the honor of visiting Miss Virgie's house, for the listeners out there, there's just this wall of, you know,
the wall of fame
happening. Exactly, wall of fame, and like, it's like history. It's like all of the most important things in American history, and then Miss Virgie's in every picture, right?
Right. Well, she's a fierce political strategist. I mean, I know when Barack first spoke at the Democratic National Convention, you know, I went to University of Chicago, and he was teaching at the law school, and Michelle helped mentor me. But you know, my aunt said, oh, I was at that convention. She'd been trying to get me to come. And she's like, I was at the convention. I met this nice young man, Barack Obama, and his wife, Michelle. And I'm like, yeah, I knew them back when I was at University of Chicago. And, and she said, if he ever runs for president, she's like, I'm going to support him 100%. And so that's, in the way she was talking about Barack is the same way she was talking about you, Abdul. And then as I listened to your book on audio, you know, audiobooks, I can tell, I can see what she's got that skill. So she's able to identify, she you know, the ability. So yeah. Well,
that's kind of you and her. I will say that I'm never gonna cast aspersions on Miss Virgie's political judgment, but you know, for me, it's less about the what and a lot more about the why. After I've finished the race, I didn't, you know, I knew that I couldn't just sort of walk sort of back out into the sunset. The fight that got me to run in the first place is continuing, if not worse. You know, I really do wish that there was more that I could have done on the front lines during COVID-19, just because, you know, I was a former health commissioner and I am an epidemiologist. I tried to do my best to just make sure folks understood what was happening and to tell the story, and then also to advise. But I do think that this moment in our politics requires a recognition of the fact that our entire system has been crumbling for a long time, and we're seeing the worst of it now, and that has real implications for our politics in the ways that people have used racism and and xenophobia to try and divide us, i.e. Donald Trump. And so I think there's still a lot more work left to do, where I can have an opportunity to serve and to continue to drive and call to a politics of empathy that brings us together around solving our problems. I hope I'll never miss those opportunities, but what form that takes, I have no idea. The last thing is, for me, I got a 2-year-old, and she is, if there's a silver lining, at least in the cloud of COVID in my life, it's been that I get to see her every day, right? Most circumstances, I'm on a plane or I'm going somewhere.
Okay.
And so, I see her on FaceTime, but I get to see her every day. And so I got to balance that responsibility, I think, with whatever comes next. So.
Right, and I remember
Father's Day in advance. Happy Father's Day.
Yeah, happy Father's Day. And yeah, I remember you. Oh, I'm sorry, Tracy. Yeah, I remember you talked about in the book too how when your wife was pregnant, how you were on the campaign trail, and I think it was maybe your child had been born, and you were preoccupied. And but with what you were saying earlier about the first wave and how you wanted to be involved, I would say right now we're in a second wave. So I think you're definitely, with your wisdom and from your book and your knowledge and background, you're going to have an opportunity to come to the forefront, and people benefit from your wisdom at such a young age too. They say in scripture, let the children lead. I mean, for you might feel like you're not a child, but I mean, I'm a little bit older than you. So, but they say, let the children lead. And so you have, mad skills. And so I'm like, maybe it was fate for you not to be governor, because you're going to have a higher calling, higher, they got Dr. Fauci, but hey, there's room for more doctors with wisdom out there,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. We see you on CNN all the time. I'm curious, have you ever had a conversation with Dr. Fauci about this pandemic?
Not yet, no. I'd love to. He doesn't know who I am, but I've watched his career for a long time. He's sort of one of those rock stars in the public health world that everybody in public health knows. And like now he's just sort of like an international icon. But I've heard him speak many times and met him several times. And he is a paragon of public service. He sort of reminds us what the best of our country's commitment to service can look like. And him and so many others. And so, when I think about what we need to preserve and protect in our government, it looks a lot like Anthony Fauci, people who have come up, committed to an ideal, and have faithfully executed on that ideal for the benefit of all of us. And so, this moment, sometimes it's easy for government to look a lot like Donald Trump. And I think it's always important to remind people that actually government looks like Anthony Fauci. It's the Donald Trumps that we got to get out of the way.
Okay, tamp them down.
Right.
And you mentioned your daughter. You mentioned your daughter, and I know that she's not school age, but one thing that is very concerning to a lot of people, that these states are reopening. And so I want to ask you, Dr. El-Sayed, how safe or how risky is it now to go to the beach, to the hair salon, to the barbershops, restaurants, and for kids to return to learn?
Or camp, too. It's camp. It's summertime. Camp.
Yeah, that's right. Everything carries with it some risk. I think the key question that people have to ask is, what can we do to reduce the risk if and when we are going to engage? And so certain things, I would wait a while, right? Anything that brings you into close contact with somebody's face, I would be a little bit careful of. And so I'm not saying like rush back into your life, but what I am saying is apply a very few basic principles. If you can stay further away from people, that's better. If you can cover your face, that's better. If you make sure that there's hand washing and you use it, that's better. And everything has a cost and a benefit. So when it comes to daycare, for example, that's pretty mission critical for our lives. There's no way that Sarah, my wife, who's a psychiatrist, and I can do our work while our 2-year-old is like up there sort of, getting her way in the living room. Like, it's just not going to happen. And so daycare is really important. And thankfully, if there is some positive note about this virus, is that it doesn't seem to affect children the same way it affects adults. And so the question that every family has to ask is, what is the cost benefit of being able to put our children back over there? And also for their own benefit. I mean, our daughter's been here. We're actually holed up with my in-laws. And so she's been here with like basically 7 adults. My brother and sister-in-law are here. My grandmother-in-law is here, and then
Yeah,
of course,
you guys
my
have a
parents-in-law.
village.
We got a little village here, but there are no kids in this village. There's one baby who is 7 months, and so awesome, and she enjoys him, but he doesn't really interact with her the same way that an older kid would. And so for her own development, there's also a question of, well, how do we make sure that she has that kind of sustaining relationship with other children that is so important for children's growth and development, right? So all of this is to say that everything should be weighed against its own benefits and challenges, and asked, is this something that A, we need to do, and B, how do we do this as safely as possible? And so people sending their kids back to daycare, or when it opens up school, these are things that I think are really important in society. But also, let's make sure that they're doing it safely. Let's advise our kids about how to be safe in those circumstances. Let's take precautions ourselves to make sure that we're not putting anybody on undue harm.
Yeah, I teach a
Doctor,
class.
are you at all
Oh,
concerned about the multi-inflammatory syndrome in children? You mentioned about COVID not affecting children as much, but locally there was a firefighter whose daughter died, and she was only 5 years old. There was a baby that was stricken with it. I don't hear too much about this multi-inflammatory syndrome in children. What's your take on that?
Yeah, it's certainly an extremely scary outcome. And just to explain the biology of it real quick, what's happening is not that the virus is causing disease itself. It's that children have really robust immune systems. And it's almost like the kid's immune system responds to COVID-19 and then goes overheats. And so that's what actually creates the syndrome. It's an overheating immune system. It is a concern. It's always a concern, but it's so rare relative to bad outcomes with COVID in adults that I think one has to be thoughtful about the risk and always vigilant about whether or not this might happen in their kids. So really paying attention to any rashes or any complaints that our kids have, but also realizing that it is an extremely rare thing that the fear of it should not dominate our sort of sense of the problem, right? It's just COVID has affected it is been exposed now to millions of people, and the number of these really, really rare inflammatory responses in kids is in the dozens, and so it's so low risk that I would say people should watch out and be careful because it could be your kid. But I wouldn't be assuming that if your kid comes in contact with COVID, that's going to happen.
Well, I know I talked to one of my friends, and she said that she's going to be doing camp at home. It's going to, just like she did school at home. Mama Joan, she went to University of Chicago with me. So Mama Joan Pierre, she said she had, for school, she had Mama Joan's school. Now she's about to have Mama Joan's camp because she said she doesn't even want to take the risk.
And that's a fair question, right? Like if folks feel like they don't want to take the risk, that is a fair approach. But that's always a question that all of us have to be weighing for ourselves. Is, what are the resources we have? What are the opportunities we have? What is the risk that we're willing to tolerate? And then always erring on the side of being cautious, but engaging in the things that are meaningful. There's also, though, the potential that we may have another resurgence, and if we have another resurgence, things are going to have to shut down again, and people are going to have to be really, really cautious. For us in our household, right? My wife is a physician. I'm an epidemiologist. The way we're thinking about it is, the lockdown scenario, you can't live that forever. And so part of me says that once the cases are low where they are right now, that maybe we can re-engage some of the things in our lives that give us meaning and do so in a way that reduces the potential harm. And then if the cases start to go back up again, then the harm outweighs the benefit, and we pull back and go back to what we're doing, being really careful. And I'll say this, I thought long and hard about going out to the protests, but it decided to do it. And the reason I decided to do it is not because I don't think that there is definitely a hazard of COVID-19 transmission, but knowing that I could mitigate that hazard to the best of my abilities, but also weighing the benefits of being one voice among many who are standing up to finally take on a problem that kills 83,000 people every year, right? And so that's what I mean by harm benefits and costs assessment. It's like, how do you mitigate the harm and maximize the benefit.
Yeah, I actually made videos. I have a website. It's robynlegal.com, Robyn with a Y. And I made two straight videos just about how to protest peacefully. I looked at the materials from the ACLU, and there was a Vice article about how to digitally protect yourself. And then my third video was how to protest peacefully, stay your ass at home. For those of us out here that are African American that have higher comorbidities, or to have, we're at people that are at risk, white folk too. I mean, it's Muslim, everybody, equal opportunity, because there are those of us that feel compelled to rush out there and protest, but then some of us have health issues, and so
Sure.
it would be a higher risk. And I protested and did rallies in the past, and so I've been trying to just encourage the kids too, like you see with the artwork here, the kid, for them to do artwork, for them to do a song, do a dance, do a rap. I mean, whatever I've been trying to sing. Singing's not I'm a dancer, okay, but I mean, we all have a talent, we all have a purpose. So it's a matter of figuring out how do we want to manifest our collective protest. And back in the 60s, people protested, and they rallied, but this is 2020, so it's like there's a digital element, so you can do social media. There's supposed to be a boycott on July 7th. I know T.I. was talking about that.
I heard about that too. And so, Doctor, I know you've got to run soon, but before you leave, would you care to comment about hydroxychloroquine treatment, and how close are we to a vaccine?
Yeah. Hydroxychloroquine is a prime example of why you should never mix politics and science that way, right? Science should always lead. And I say this as somebody who is both a scientist and involved in politics, is that science is not about what we want to happen. Politics is about what we want to happen, right? We got to take it and force that outcome to happen. That's politics. Science is about asking, what is God? What does the world want to happen, right? And you have to take your own bias out of it and just set up studies and say, what do they say? And what do they tell us about what is true? And hydroxychloroquine was it's a very cheap drug. Some of the newer chloroquines are not, but it's a drug that was invented in 1944, first to take on malaria, and it's got a bunch of other uses. It's most commonly used now for treatment of autoimmune disorders. And there was some study out of France that showed that there might be good outcomes with hydroxychloroquine, but these studies didn't use the best and most rigorous scientific setup. And so we couldn't assess whether or not hydroxychloroquine had better outcomes relative to placebo. Which is what the gold standard scientific approach is: randomized controlled trial. You just randomize people to this treatment or that treatment and see what happens. And so, that as more evidence has come out, we found that it's not safe, and the effectiveness is somewhat minimal. But this was after the president made a whole thing about hydroxychloroquine being the treatment. And so it's just a reminder that we have to let science play its course, because people can get really hurt if we don't. And then as for a vaccine, there are a couple of promising vaccines out there. There are 7 candidate vaccines in phase 1, meaning we're testing to make sure that they are safe. 7 vaccines in phase 2, and then 1 vaccine in phase 3. Phase 3 is to see whether it's effective. The earliest we could possibly have a vaccine in theory is September. But there are still real issues about, A, can we manufacture it at scale? Can we make enough of the vaccine to be able to give it to everybody? And then B, how do we make sure we give it to the people who are most vulnerable first rather than the richest people first, which is like the way we do most things in a society where we're more driven by profit than we are by public health. And so these are open questions that we need to make sure that we drive forward. But, all of this is to say science has to lead the way when it comes to these questions. And we've got to tell our politicians to get out of the way, right? Wait till the science comes in, and then it's your job to make sure it comes out. So, the thing I tell Donald Trump about this vaccine stuff is, look, right, you better make sure that we are ready to manufacture whatever the vaccine is at scale and get it to our most vulnerable people first, if and when the science shows that we have a safe and effective vaccine. But you can't interfere with the science.
What are
I
your
gotta
thoughts
ask you
on
something about that.
Remdesivir? I might be butchering.
Oh,
Remdesivir. Yeah, remdesivir is
Remdesivir. Yes.
it's an antiviral that that was created actually to treat Ebola. That is owned by a company called Gilead, and it's shown that it reduces the time spent in a hospital for people with really serious disease. That has better scientific evidence behind it than hydroxychloroquine, but it's still not perfect, right? And it's still not showing us an improved mortality. And also, Gilead has a lot of problematic history around their pricing practices and leaving people without the medications that they need.
and so what do you say to people? You indicated a moment ago that the most vulnerable populations should be first in line for the vaccine, but there's a lot of fear out here about the safety of a new vaccine, especially given that vaccines, as you know, can take years to develop. So what would you say to individuals who say, nah, I'm not doing it, I'm not going to be first in line, even though this is an individual who should probably get a vaccine?
And that's every individual's choice to make. That being said, I think we have seen this disease kill literally hundreds of thousands of people worldwide, and we have to trust the scientific process. So, the science has a process for making sure that things are safe, and if this is a safe vaccine, I would encourage people to take it because, you're keeping yourself and all your loved ones safe by getting yourself immunized. So, I think when it comes to certain diseases, there is a requirement that we get people vaccinated in society. I think that there's going to be enough people storming the gates to get this vaccine when it's ready, that I would encourage folks who are most exposed to get theirs, because you're keeping not just yourself healthy by doing it, you're also protecting everybody else who comes in contact with you. And that's our responsibility in the public. If you all excuse me, I have to go.
All right, thank you. Blessings.
And
How
please do
can
give your
people
auntie a
get
kiss
your
for me.
book?
Will
Your
do.
book. How can people get your book?
Go to healingpoliticsbook.com. HEALING politicsbook.com. Healingpoliticsbook.com.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Doctor.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Dr.
Dr. El-Sayed. Be
El-Sayed.
blessed.
Thank
Be
you.
safe.
Stay safe. Happy Father's Day in
Yeah,
advance.
happy Father's
Bye-bye.
Day.
You.
Wow, that was a great interview.
Yeah, that
Wasn't
was
it?
really good. You see, I
Very
got my Black Women
informative.
Lawyers badge. Attorney Rita White, our president. I'm vice president, and I know you remember. We did a program yesterday.
I used to be on the board.
Yes. Tracy lended us. We had her for some time to give us her beautiful artistic and media PR skills, strategy, all that. So. So Rita and I did a program yesterday on how to protest peacefully and what to do and stop by the police with the Washtenaw County Sheriff Jerry Clayton. I thought it went really well. You can check it out on the Black Women Lawyers, our Facebook page. And yeah, I thought it went really well. We went over, we started out talking a lot about what to do and stop by the police. Actually, some of the stuff we were just talking about with Dr. El-Sayed about, I asked on the protest part, I said, at what point does the authorities decide to use tear gas or tanks, military tanks? And he said, tear gas. He said both of those items were not something that they typically would use. But he said with tear gas, it might be used to eliminate a threat. I guess if there's a greater threat and they feel that by dispersing the crowd, maybe they think there's a terrorist bomb or something it would disperse the crowd quickly. I don't know. No, I don't. That's not my forte. You and I are lawyers. I'll stay in my lane.
Yeah, I'm using microphone advocacy. I was invited to protest. The public defenders had their protests earlier this week, and I saw a number of our colleagues out there, but I just don't feel comfortable doing it. As I said at the top of the broadcast, I lost a dear friend of mine, and I do believe, now I don't know what the cause of death was, but I do believe it was COVID-19 related because he was forced to go back to work early, and he was fine, and then now he's gone. So
right, I remember you talked about that. Building. Yeah, you talked about that at the beginning. Building. I'm sorry, go ahead. You go first.
Well, he worked in a government building, and you and I are both lawyers, and we've been doing hearings on Zoom court as they call it, but no trials because that would be an infringement on the client's constitutional rights.
Right to
But
confront
I
witnesses
really,
against you. Yeah, in
I
person.
don't know if I'm ever going to step foot in a courthouse this year or ever again, quite frankly. I have some real fears. I know that they said that these government buildings have been sanitized, but I don't know about you, but when I sometimes go shopping, I see an individual going by and wiping down the doors, with the disinfectant. And I don't see that happening at these courthouses. But I do hear that they are going to be installing plexiglass shields on the benches to shield judges. But what about the rest of us? What about, the lawyers? And what about the bailiffs and the sheriff's deputies and the clerks and the court reporters and the rest of us, the clients? What protections are we going to have when we go back to work, if
Right,
ever?
with your friend Mr. Jackson. I mean, it was my understanding that something about he may have collapsed on an elevator, and that he was immunocompromised, that he had been a organ recipient, and was compelled to go to work even though he had all these comorbidities. And I don't
Yes.
know. I haven't read anything to that effect. That's just what I had heard, and I think that. I say I gotta plug in my laptop. The battery's low, but what I was saying is
Okay.
that um, yeah, that was just really it was intense. And when I heard that they had the court closed down for 3 days, I'm assuming. And since COVID has hit, my experience has been that the courts have been very quick. If somebody is sick or has passed away, they with a quickness they seem like they're getting it together, having somebody to clean it. The Frank Murphy, and then we did have a meeting the other day with the criminal defense bar, the Wayne County Criminal
How'd
Defense
that go?
Bar. I thought that went really well. Our president is Luther Glenn, so shout out to Luther and Lillian and Gabi Silva and Wendy Barnwell and some of the other board members. But yeah, they gave us an update, and they were saying that 36th district, they were talking about opening it up on Monday, but then I heard that had been changed and put out a couple of weeks, and that they were going to I guess actually have more people in the building. And when I just think about what happened with your friend Calvin, I'm like, we've got to be very careful. I mean, I know everybody's getting acclimated to this Zoom technology, but it's like this. I think the Zoom technology, until we get a cure or a vaccine, like Dr. El-Sayed said, we're not going back to things as normal. This is like, what is it? What I said before, the Jetsons. This is Star Trek. It's like people need to
Right.
just got to learn how to do stuff and the prosecutor, and I hope they hear me. The prosecutors need to give better deals, be more reasonable, be more compassionate with the deals, so we don't have to take all these cases to trial, because at this rate, I don't know when they're going to have any trials, because what witnesses are going to want to come down to the courts with a plague, with a virus out there,
Right. And so I think that this is a time where, unless it's some sort of egregious assault of crime, everyone should, every person of interest, a defendant, should be getting a personal bond. There shouldn't be anybody locked up or, excuse me, detained in these jails. I like how Dr. El-Sayed explained the difference between a jail and a prison, and the risk factors for people being detained or confined in each of those settings. But I totally agree with you. I don't understand how courts could even open this year. I know I had to file an objection at one court because they wanted to force us to do a trial by Zoom, and I objected on the basis of, well, in this case, it's a civil matter, so I objected on the basis of infringement on due process. On the criminal side, of course, it would be an infringement on the right of confrontation. So the motion went well, but the trial got put over to the end of July. Frankly, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to go inside that building. I just do not feel safe. And yes, Cal Jackson, he did collapse in an elevator at Frank Murphy Hall of Justice. They called EMS. He was rushed to EMS. He was rushed to the hospital by EMS, and he was taken to ICU, where he was in stable condition for a while, but he suffered cardiac arrest, and then he subsequently died. Now, he was healthy. Yes, he was immunocompromised because of a liver transplant that they received about 6.5, 7 years ago, but he was in good health. I talk to Cal all the time. And I told him, I said, look, dude, I think, you're close to retirement. You have probably got to retire, And he said, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it by the end of the year. But then he said he was either going to teach and or come back and work at 36th District Court. And I'm like, no, no, don't do that. And he was a member of ASME. And I just think that the union has really got to consider, the ASME union has got to consider the safety of its membership in these government buildings. Because one thing I didn't get a chance to ask Dr. El-Sayed was, when you're in these confined spaces like a government building, that air is circulating, recirculating. And if you're there for a period of 8, 9, 10 hours and you're exposed to that, I mean, that could be a risk factor, you think?
Right. No, I know prior to the pandemic, if you go to some of the, like some of the buildings, some of our court buildings, the conditions were very unsanitary. The jail, definitely unsanitary. I have colleagues that when they would go to the jail, they would have hand sanitizer, they would have wipes. So the conditions were substandard prior to the pandemic. And we heard from Dr. El-Sayed, now with the pandemic, it's like a breeding, the jails, and he even said the prisons. I know that's why we've been trying to help with compassionate release for our federal prisoners, as well as when I did a motion for a client for the state prison, and he's facing charges for carjacking and armed robbery. And as I was, doing the motion, I did the research, and what the judges have to do is they have to do a balancing act. They have to balance public safety with the risk of harm to the inmates, and so if they feel, because I mean, the judges have to look at if they let somebody out. It's just like when I was talking about how I'd reached out to a pastor who was working with prisoner reentry on the federal level. They said they have to be careful about who they release and how they release them, what supports are in place, because they're concerned that there could be acts of violence. So it's like they need to have a psychiatrist or psychologist come in and assess people, and also see if they have family support, church support, job training, college support. I said, almost like you and I work at the juvenile court. It's almost like, we look for foster parents to take in children that have been abused. I think you need to have adults who are willing to take in the prisoners who maybe they don't have family, or maybe they need a lot of love and support. Just like you see a lot of people out there white folk trying to rescue these dogs and everything you feel that have been abused. It's like, okay, well, they're humans. I like animals. I love animals. You see, I got my stuffed animals, even though I'm allergic. But we in America, we need to reverse this American apartheid system. We need to pray, meditate, and they need, some white folk and some other folk that have the skills need to adopt some of these prisoners, so you can keep them on the right track. I know I work with a lot of my clients as it is, and so and a lot of them are on the outside. But yeah, we definitely, our country just needs to be more compassionate in general.
Well, I agree. I think that we need to follow the Norway model, quite frankly. Have you seen some of their jails and prisons? First of all, they don't have very many people locked up there.
No, I've been hearing a lot about
They
Sweden.
look like college dorms. They look like high-tech, very comfy college dorms. But to your point about adoption of inmates or people who are re-entering society, or people who might be out on bond but don't have anywhere to go, I agree with you. We need to have more compassion here. And I know one idea that has been floated out there is to sort of have Airbnb type model. If people have properties, they could get compensation from a government entity to put these individuals up in a safe, nice, clean environment.
Right, like grants or government subsidies.
Exactly. So you don't have the person actually living with you in your family setting, because that could be disruptive. But they could live in I call it a prison B&B. So that was a policy idea that I came up with in working with a politician recently. So, I mean, there's so much going on, but what I want to ask you is, there was so much happening this week. Who would you say is your hero of the week or your villain of the week in the news cycle?
Who the hero? Gosh. Oh, okay. My hero is the 75-year-old from Buffalo, New
Martin
York.
Gugino.
Yeah, Martin.
Martin
I wrote
Gugino.
it down somewhere. You said Martin, who was a
Gugino.
peaceful Regino. Yeah, who's the peaceful protester, and minding his own business. And the officers looked like the officers were coming like RoboCop. I know you said you worked on the RoboCop. They were marching through like the military, and just I guess pushed him, and then he fell, and then they said there was one officer reaching down to get him, and the other officer said no, and then I guess they have suspended the two officers directly involved, and then the rest of the officers are talking about they're going to resign, and
they did resign. They resigned from the unit. They didn't resign from the force, from the department, but they resigned from that SRT or SWAT unit. So
I think that's some. They probably, if they did some research, they probably had some issues before, and this is like a union ploy for them to try to get more things done. But this is not really the best time to be doing that, because now you got people talking about defunding the police, and for those people that live in safe neighborhoods where there's not a lot of crime and violence, maybe it's okay for them to defund the police. But I can tell you right here, there's some folks in Detroit. I mean, I had a case, and I was the defense attorney, where a woman said that she had called the police. She said that a client, allegedly my client, had been choking her, and that they didn't come. She had to convince him, allegedly, to get him to stop, and they said the police didn't come till hours later. So I mean, it's interesting. People talk about defunding the police. I think they need to deprogram, reprogram, recondition the police, get rid of the KKK cops, but defunding the police, that's not realistic for especially.
Well, Robyn,
yeah.
Robyn, defund the police is the new slogan of Black Lives Matter. And defund the police means different things to different people. And, the call for defunding the police has also been joined by a rally to abolish certain police departments. And in fact, in Camden, New Jersey, they did end up abolishing their police department, which I find quite interesting. But for some politicians, and we need politicians to enact, propose legislation and get it passed. But for some politicians and activist groups, defunding the police simply means redirecting the funds. We talked last week about how police departments, law enforcement agencies have been catch-alls for including people who are mentally ill. So the FTEs, the budget, the funds that go to law enforcement agencies, they could be redirected into some real mental health programs. Because, in Michigan, when Engler was governor, he got rid of all the psychiatric hospitals and the funding. And so these jails and these prisons have become veritable dumping grounds for people with mental health issues. And these facilities simply do not have the resources to treat them.
Well, I would definitely agree, in light of the work that I do and representing clients that are indigent, and then my private practice, I have a number of clients that would definitely benefit from being in having a mental health facility available to them, either for a short term, some of them long term, they could benefit from that. So there's definitely, especially here in Detroit, there's a lack of resources. The concern I have about defund the police, I don't know if you're following, Spike Lee was saying to be careful about using that language, because our president, has a way of, what do they call him? As a political strategist, some call him genius. He has a way of taking things and running with it. And so there are people that will get scared if they hear defund the police. That'll be a trigger for them, and that could trigger them into voting for the president. So that's where I'm saying, of course, I think there's a need to, ban the chokehold. I think you need to have get rid of qualified immunity, as my understanding, Supreme Court Justice allegedly Clarence Thomas has suggested. We have to. I mean, I know there's opinion out there, but we'll have to see how he would actually vote, because your actions speak louder than words. But qualified immunity, and you need to reprogram, recondition, retrain the police, because the way you look on the news, and it's like military police. It's like the way they're being trained as soldiers, and it's like, okay, America is at war with itself, and that's not cool. America, we need to be looking at other countries, other folks that might be out there trying to do us harm. This is a time, whether you're a Democrat or Republican or independent, for people to come together, for Americans to come together, not let us be divided by propaganda on race, gender, and class, but for us to come together, and so that we can get past all of these, these ills, the COVID virus, the virus of racism, and just all the evil people that are out there. I know you would ask me a question, who was my champion in the news. I'd have to think about that.
Well, you said Martin Gugino, the
Yes,
protester.
okay, so he's the champion, and then
He
I
was
guess
accused of being a member of Antifa, by the way, by POTUS, by
right,
Trump.
and then who would be my villain? I'm trying to think. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of feel like the officer that pushed him. I mean, we haven't heard that officer give his statement. He might have been pumped up, adrenaline. I'm talking to some of my friends that are officers. We don't know what's going on with that officer. But it just is not a good look. And if it was a mistake, it should have. And I know they're worried about liability, but it should have been an apology right away. Should have been like truth and reconciliation with the police and the people that are brutalized with the police, like they did in South Africa. America needs truth and reconciliation right now because of all these apartheid conditions. It's embarrassing. Other countries are looking at us, and America is looking real raggedy right now in the way it's treating black people. It's like the way they were treating Native Americans. And I mean, I know we were mistreated too, but it's like America should be embarrassed. I'm very patriotic, but it's like America needs to get it together. And
well, speaking of embarrassment, I found it to be highly embarrassing what happened in Georgia with the primary election, where people were forced to wait hours, up to 3 and 4 hours in line just to vote. They lost ballots. They didn't have sufficient staff to process the ballots.
Right.
And so many are concerned that this is going to be a bellwether. What happened in Georgia is that a bellwether for what's going to happen during our general election coming up on November 3rd. So I find that very scary. But in terms of my hero of the week, it's Bubba Wallace, the NASCAR driver who drives a Black Lives Matter car, number 43.
I saw that.
And I love Bubba Wallace for taking a stand on his anti-Confederate flag stance and for bringing wokeness to NASCAR. And
yes.
I find this incredible, the contrast between how the NFL treated Colin Kaepernick and how Bubba Wallace is just taking a stand, and NASCAR is going along with it because now other drivers, they've dumped this helmet producer because someone connected with this manufacturer of helmets made some very nasty comments on Twitter about in support of the Confederate flag. And so now the white drivers and Bubba Wallace, who's Black, I think he's mixed, but he's Black, they've all dumped this helmet producer. So I applaud Bubba Wallace for being a leader in terms of social justice and racial justice. And he's really making an impact, but he's got to be careful because we're living in an age of craziness right now. People are following the lead coming out of DC, in particular the White House, and he's got to be careful. He's my hero of the week, though, Bubba Wallace.
Well, I was impressed. I know you and I talked about it on the phone about Lady Antebellum. I actually like their music. I know you were. I mean, some people don't like the Lady Antebellum that goes back to slavery, and they were saying that they were going to change their name to Lady A. I feel like they should do something like, I don't know, make it a black name like Lady Aretha, like in honor of Aretha Franklin. I don't know. I mean, I guess.
No. Did you hear the latest about that?
What?
Okay, so Lady Antebellum. I'm not really down for that type of music, but I have seen them perform on the Grammys, and they can carry a tune. They
sound wonderful. Yeah.
Well, so. I wasn't down for that name. That name turned me off. And so every time I heard it, Antebellum, I cringed. But the latest news on that is, so they attempted to change their name to be all woke by changing the name to Lady A. And so a black female performer, I believe she's based in Vegas, she said, oh, no, you don't, because that's my name. Okay, I'm Lady A, and you're not going to co-opt that name. So now there's going to be a legal tug of war about who has the rights to that name between Lady Antebellum, now trying to call themselves Lady A, and the real artist named Lady A black female performer. She says, you guys have been doing this for years. You've been co-opting our work and taking our names, and you're not going to do it to me in 2020. So I applaud her for standing up for herself.
Right. Maybe they should do something like, you and I talked about the statues, like taking all the statues. First, some people said put them in one Confederate museum, or I was talking to my nephew yesterday about we could take all the statues and make it into one, like a statue honoring an abolitionist from the Civil War. And for Lady Antebellum, maybe they could be Lady of Abolitionists. Huh?
I say John Brown, Nat Turner, Frederick Douglass, the General Harriet Tubman.
Right, maybe Lady Antebellum or Lady A, they could be Lady Abolitionist, or I don't know, do something, Statue of Liberty or something.
That would be good. But you mentioned about that's a hot issue about these Confederate and slaver statutes that have been put up, in these states and on these government complexes. And West Point graduated today. I missed the graduation. I wanted to see that, but I'll watch it back. It was at 10 a.m. They started live streaming at 9:30.
Oh, I heard about that a little bit in the news.
Everybody was chattering about that because, Trump was due to deliver the commencement address at West Point. We have cadets graduating today, and they will become second Army lieutenants. Congratulations to you all.
Yes, thank you. Congratulations.
But I wonder what POTUS said at that commencement address, and I point this ties into what you were saying. Robert Lee is all over that West Point complex, and so there's a big controversy about how they're going to handle that. And recently a lot of these generals have come out against POTUS. Most recently, General Milley, who distanced himself and disavowed that action that POTUS took, where he had the police tear gas protesters so he could walk to St. John Episcopal Church unimpeded. And he had General Milley accompany him, and he said, that was wrong. That was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. And he apologized in his uniform. He held a press conference. And then General Mattis, Mad Dog Mattis, he also disavowed and rebuked POTUS for his actions. And even also General Colin Powell said he's going to vote for Biden. He's not going to support Donald Trump in the upcoming election on November 3rd. So I applaud the generals. They're also my co-heroes
right.
For taking a stance. And my villain is POTUS, because I think it was heinous that he was going to hold that MAGA rally on Juneteenth, June 19th, the first rally ever in Tulsa, Oklahoma, site of the Black Wall Street massacre. Well, now did you hear the latest? He's changed the date. He said his Black supporters have contacted him and said, I don't think you should have it on Juneteenth 45. You should change the date. And so now the new date is going to be June 20th.
I wouldn't be surprised if that was some strategy on his part to get more attention, and then to look, first he's looking like the villain, then he's looking like the hero. And so I wouldn't be surprised, just like they're putting pressure on him for Jacksonville. And because say what you will about the president, but he's got, either he or he himself has got some mad strategy skills, or he's got some mad strategists there that are like, they're looking at this. And just like with that whole defund the police, that could backfire against the Democrats. It could backfire because it could.
I agree.
Yeah, we have to be careful.
He's going to take that and manipulate that, especially when it comes to these upcoming debates, these presidential debates that are going to be occurring in September and October. And I think that's why it's important for the Democratic nominee to be Joe Biden to name his running mate. So did you hear the latest? He's whittled it down to 6 names, and most of them are Black females. There are only 2 white females, Elizabeth Warren and the governor out there in New Mexico, Grisham. But the top contenders are Susan Rice. Her name is heavily mentioned.
Okay. I have
her
book. That's my next book for me to listen to.
Really? Yes. Kamala Harris, Susan Rice, Val Demings is still in the running. Keisha Lance Bottoms, and that's 3, right? 4, 5. There's one other. I didn't hear Stacey Abrams' name mentioned, so
Oh,
I
I
don't
know
know what's
somebody
up
was
with that.
talking about the mayor of DC that she might be up.
Oh yes, Muriel Bowser. Thank you. She's the
Yeah,
other one.
Muriel
Right.
Bowser might be up for. Yeah, so I think it's gonna be interesting. I see you've got your signs for Kamala Harris. I read her book. I liked her book. I know some of the younger people are looking at her because of her past as a prosecutor. But yeah, I liked her. I met her in person. I think she definitely, as far as criminal justice reform and what we're about, she definitely has the consciousness and is with the people. I talked about Val Demings last week about her background as a chief. I think she could definitely be helpful as far as dealing with these recent issues with police misconduct issues. And just like yesterday, we had Washington County Sheriff Jerry Clayton, who is he travels the country when there's not a pandemic. And he will advise other police, I guess, agencies or to how to do de-escalation tactics and how to be police, the police that should be, like, I know they've talked about in the news, the police should be guardians. They should act more as guardians than as, like, the way the media has them as these military folks coming after American civilians. It should be done differently. So
Right. Well, I think I am on the fence about defunding the police, but I definitely think it should be demilitarized, because if you've noticed an escalation in the deaths of Black people as the militarization of the police has risen. I've seen that. I'm actually working on
right.
a study on that right now, so I'm all for that. But our time is coming to the
I do
close at
see that.
11:30. And what are you working on? What are your next events? What can you tell us?
What am I doing? I mean, well, I know that there's a prayer vigil in Ypsilanti where you can be outside and in your car. I don't know. I have to see if if I'll do that. I've got some work that I'm doing on some cases, criminal family law, playing catch up. I'm dealing with some, making sure, trying to keep up on my, I've talked about some health issues, making sure I follow up on that. And, yeah, trying to take walks in the park, be healthy, and spend time with family. And what about you?
Well, next week we're going to have Victoria Burton Harris on. She's running for Wayne County prosecutor, and she is now the Dr. Abdul El-Sayed.
Oh, you know what?
Bernie
I
Sanders
gotta run real
endorsee.
quick. Let me just run real quick. I'll be right back. Let me see.
Okay, well, I'll keep talking then. And so Victoria Burton Harris, she's going to be joining us on Political Coffee next week at 2 p.m. And actually, I have a double header that day because prior to 2 p.m. at 12 noon, courtesy of Black Women Lawyers Association of Michigan, I have the honor of interviewing Her Honor, Kamisha D. Gantz of 6th Judicial Circuit Court out of Oakland County. And we're going to be talking about voter education, voter rights. It's such a hot topic, such a timely topic. And specifically, we're going to be talking about voter registration, how to apply for an absentee ballot. If you haven't received an application in the mail, now you can go, if you're in Michigan, you can go right on the michigan.gov/SOS or michigan.gov/elections website, and you can request an application to vote absentee. And then finally, with Judge Gant, we're going to be talking about why it's important to flip over the ballot and vote for the all-important judicial races. I'll tell you in a nutshell, it's because judges have so much impact on people's lives, but she's going to go into detail. And so we got Judge Gant for about 30 minutes, and then I will be going over an update on voting across the United States of America and what you need to know. So that's going to happen on Saturday, June 20th, 12 noon. B. Lamb's voter education special featuring Judge Kamisha Gant. And then at 2 p.m., you and I, Robyn, we're going to be interviewing Victoria Burton Harris.
yes.
She's an attorney, a Flint native, and she's running for Wayne County prosecutor. And I think we're going to reach out to the incumbent Wayne County prosecutor.
Kim Worthy.
See if she might join us.
Yeah, I did. I have reached out to some of her folks to see about her, to see if she can come on our show. Or, as you know, Black Women Lawyers is planning to have a candidate forum with some of the judicial. Well, oh no, all the judicial candidates for the circuit court, and then for what else for the candidates for the prosecutor's office. So of course we would because for us, or myself, I'm impartial, so we would definitely want to reach out to Kim Worthy, and we got an acceptance from Victoria Burton Harris, and I think it's definitely important that you hear from both candidates. And I think as you do your voter education, I think it's important that we do educate people about who are the people that are running for office. Get more of the background, see what they like about them, what they don't like about them, have an opportunity to engage with them, and just see what are, for us, like, what are they doing as far as criminal justice reform. I just got a confirmation. Ben Crump said that he'll be able to join our Black women lawyers meeting remotely. So that'll be.
Are we going to get a chance to interview him here on the Political Coffee? I'm reaching for my book, Ben Crump's book.
Oh yeah, I got my book as well.
Yeah.
Well, he confirmed for the Black women lawyers meeting. So I will see. I guess we can see if he's available to come on our show as well. And
Just
I know he's crazy busy with the George Floyd situation, and Breonna Taylor.
But if he could fit us in for 10 minutes, that would be great. If he could come on.
And even Ahmaud Arbery, I reached out to Lee Merritt too, so waiting to hear back to see if we could get him on, because I know a lot of our women for Black women lawyers in Michigan were asking about Ahmaud Arbery, as they were asking about Breonna Taylor. Like, what Black women lawyers have asked, like, what can we do? How can we, we can do know your rights events. We can do, like I do, my What to Do and Stop by the Police. We can do, I think it's just kind of like whatever you feel inclined to do. We just need to make sure we support each other as a team and to do it. Everybody has their gift. I'm a good dancer, a singer. I'm working on my singing, because I'm encouraging kids to how to protest peacefully by singing. So I'm working on it. And
nice. That's very nice.
Yeah.
I love that idea. I love that. Well, I also want to mention that coming up this Tuesday, June 16th, I'm going to be interviewing State House District 3 candidate Shri Tanadar. He's going to be covering police brutality, police reform, and a host of other criminal justice issues. And we're going to be joined by attorney Linda Bernard. So you can't miss that. That's going to come up. That's coming up, I should say, on Tuesday, June 16th at 7 p.m. And that's courtesy of Zoom, but it will be broadcast live on Facebook Live through Shri Tanadar for state representative, that particular page.
Okay.
So there's a lot happening in America. And I am going to try to get Bubba Wallace. I want Bubba to come on and speak with us. Maybe he can, squeeze in about 15, 20 minutes, because he's just doing so much, and he's just such a hero. And I just can't believe the leadership and the change that he is effectuating on that NASCAR circuit. It's amazing.
Yeah, no, I think that would be amazing. And I did also reach out to Lillian Diallo, who is our vice president for criminal defense bar for the Wayne County Criminal Defense Bar, and she and Gabby and Luther, Wendy Barnwell they've been doing their part as criminal defense attorneys in the trenches, making sure to protect the rights of the clients. And they did a protest the other day, and as I said, we all have our part on how to end the racism and apartheid system in America. We can pray, meditate, protest, rally. We just I think you have to figure out what is God calling you to do, and get to it. And that's the way to go. But yeah, I think that would be great to have Bubba Wallace, to have him on. And as time progresses, I think we'll try to see if we can get Jocelyn Benson to come out. I did nonpartisan election protection with her the last time during the when Obama ran for office, and it'd be good to get an update from her about the Secretary of State, what they're doing. Maybe Dana Nessel too. We'll see. Yeah, we'll see who.
That would be great if you could get Jocelyn Benson. I'm sure she would come on. Definitely. So, we've had some great guests. Last week we had attorney extraordinaire Arnold E. Reed, who's handled business misconduct cases and won millions of dollars and represented his clients so well on a national level and a local level. He said he was coming up on Dr. Phil and another national show. And then today we were blessed with an interview by Dr. Abdul El-Sayed, who ran for governor in 2018. He says he came in second, and now he's on CNN almost every day. And he's got a new podcast called America Dissected and a new book called Healing Politics. And I'm glad that we both got a copy, and you guys should get a copy too, because the interview today was just like a little appetizer, highlights of the book. But
the book was, I am a bookworm. That book, I'm listening to it on audiobooks. It makes me think of Barack Obama, but he's so insightful and talking about his experiences as an Arab American and as a Muslim, and his, how his parents came together, his travels to Egypt, and then coming back here, dealing with after 9/11, dealing with racism and xenophobia, and it's one of those books I can see it pulling me in, and I'll probably finish it quickly because it's that good. It's a good book. It's an excellent book.
It is, and the things that he said today about the pandemic and protests and the intersectionality of all of that was just phenomenal. So I hope that he gets back out there. When I heard him on NPR a couple of weeks back, he did say that he felt like he was a general without a war, and he exudes such strong leadership ability. I just think it was all about timing, and that's why he wasn't able to clinch the governorship in Michigan. But I love to see him run for Congress or Senate, and then, hey, I could see him eventually running for the big one, the presidency of the United States of America. I mean, he is just that phenomenal, and the leadership that he exudes and him being a doctor, this intersectionality between medicine and politics, and his leadership ability, he would be just excellent.
Yeah, we just need all the top doctors from all across the land to come together. Doesn't matter whether you're a Republican or Democrat, independent. They need to have a conferencing of all the doctors so they can pull all the wisdom to come up with a cure for Corona, or for the COVID-19, and or a vaccine. Heal the land, heal the nation. That's what I've been praying for. Yeah.
I like that. And I want to close with a quote that he cited in his book. And he said that medicine is a social science and politics is nothing else but medicine on a large scale. And that quote comes from Dr. Rudolph Virchow, and that is a reference in Healing Politics. You can see it over my shoulder. A doctor's journey into the heart of our political epidemic. I wanted to ask him about this partisan gap, with the whole mask thing. Seems like Democrats are wearing masks and Republicans aren't. And perhaps we can get him back on at some future date. But wow, there's just so much division in this country, but it's all going to come to a head, I believe, on November 3rd during this general election. What do you think?
Who knows? We'll see, or maybe even sooner. We just have to see how things play out. I just think Americans need to come together, because this whole, look at the model for South Africa. We need to come together so that we can all, we're all Americans at the end of the day. And, you will look at certain media, and certain media has you going one way, another media has you going another way. And it's not healthy. It's toxic,
No, it's not. So, praying for peace. So, okay. Well, I think that's all the time we have for today. Go Wonder Woman.
Yeah, Wonder Woman. I love Wonder Woman.
Right. Yes.
All right.
Okay, Robyn. Well, it was great talking with you. I thought we had an excellent discussion with Dr. El-Sayed, and I'll catch you next week with Victoria Burton-Harris.
Okay. Well, you stay safe and be blessed. Okay.
Right. The sweeter the coffee, the stronger the truth. Bye-bye, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
How do I? Oh.